Welcome everyone to the August meeting of the Warren County Board of Supervisors. Please rise while Supervisor Stroud leads us in the pledge to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The clerk will read the roll.
Mr. Leggett?
Here.
Mr. Diamond?
Here.
Mr. McDevitt?
Here.
Ms. Bramer?
Here.
Mr. Loeb?
Here.
Mr. Driscoll?
Here.
Mrs. Frazier?
Here.
Mr. Simpson?
Here.
Mrs. Hogan?
Here.
Mr. Dickinson?
Here.
Mr. Merlino?
Here.
Mr. Stroud?
Here.
Mr. Wild?
Here.
Mr. Beatty?
Here.
Mr. McGowan?
Here.
Mr. Sokol?
Here.
Mr. Thomas?
Here.
Ms. Hyde?
Here.
Mr. Garrity?
Here.
Chairman Conover?
Here. You should all have received the minutes of our July 20 board meeting. Chair will entertain a motion subject to correction by the clerk. A motion to approve the minutes. Ms. Bramer on the motion. Second. Mr. Driscoll on the second. Supervisor Driscoll on the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are adopted. Report by the chairman. This last month was an extremely busy month, many meetings, committee meetings on July 23rd and 24th. Later in the afternoon, evening of the 24th, at the invitation of Supervisor Hogan, I had the pleasure of attending a public meeting at the station in Johnsburg. Also had an opportunity to tour the museum that's in the station. If you have not seen the museum, it's a beautiful museum, and I highly recommend it. We had an opportunity to do a little walking tour and a little driving tour on a bus, and to answer questions from the residents. It was really a terrific meeting. Also in attendance were Supervisor Simpson, Supervisor Wild, and Supervisor Leggett, as well as our DPW Commissioner Kevin Hajos and our County Attorney Mary Cassane. On July 25th, I attended the Lake George Regional Planning Board, Lake George Lake Champlain Regional Planning Board meeting. You do have a resolution in front of you this morning to approve the new and improved bylaws that need to be ratified by all 5 counties. Just as an aside, I'd like to thank Supervisor Stroud for his representation on that working group. John, thank you very much for the time you've devoted to this. On July 30, more committee meetings. And then on July 31st, at the invitation of Supervisor Simpson, president of AATV, I attended an early morning meeting with Assemblyman Bill Jones in Plattsburgh to discuss a number of subjects, including his proposed EMS legislation, and also to discuss the likelihood of the legislature being called back into session. As you know, we have a mortgage tax extension still sitting down there in Albany, and it does have implications in our 2019 budget. So we'll certainly keep you posted on what evolves there. On August 2nd, more committee meetings, including a meeting on the 10th, a Public Works meeting, to discuss railroad matters. On August 13, committee meetings. On August 14, I attended a Stop Aquatic Invasive meeting where we discussed future happenings relative to the SAVE group. And then on August 16th, I attended a meeting of the Health Insurance Working Group, the Warren County Health Insurance Working Group. And that concludes my report. Reports by committee chairman, Supervisor Stroud.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The legislative and rules have 5 resolutions before you today. But before I begin, I want to thank Supervisor Leggett for standing in for me momentarily at the past meeting. Thank you. Resolution 322 is a resolution in support of the High Peaks Wilderness Complex and the Vanderwacken Mountain Wild Forest Unit Management Plan amendments. And The plan supports proposed parking lot near the Boreas Ponds Dam for disabled visitors as well as universal access, and supports proposal for seasonal hunting vehicular access on the Boreas Road, supports changes and reroutes to the Wright Peak Ski Trail to connect to Wales Trail Ski Trail, and allows further backcountry ski trails, and it supports prevention of the introduction and spread of invasive species, particularly aquatic invasive species by watercraft. And it has resolved that the addition of at least one watercraft inspection and decontamination station at Frontier Town Visitor Center or near Gulf Brook Road to prevent the introduction of aquatic invasive species. I think what is here is worthy of our support, so I'm asking you to support Resolution 322. Resolution 323 is a resolution that is basically to try and get a cost recovery for the costs of the opioid disaster that's occurring in our society. This is to set a public hearing for September 21st at our Board of Supervisors meeting here. And the opioid legislation is being presented before you because the opioid epidemic is sweeping in the country, and we know the addictions and the abuse, and we know what it's costing us emotionally as well as financially. And the purpose of this legislation is the county to better enable the county to recover some of these costs. Resolution 324. Resolution 324, again, is to set a public hearing. The public hearing day would be September 21st, 10 a.m. here in this room, Board of Supervisors meeting. And the public hearing will be about a local law that promotes the use of reusable bags and tries to reduce the use of single-use carry-out bags by prohibiting the distribution of the plastic bags in Warren County and authorizing a public hearing. So this is a public hearing for September 21st. Supervisor Bramer is the one taking the leadership role on this and may have more to say at some point in this meeting. I'm sure she will. But this resolution is to set the public hearing for that. Resolution 346. Resolution is amending the Freedom of Information FOIL law. I think if you look at what's in red, deleted has a line struck through it, and the new being proposed are in italics. I think you'll find the wording of our FOIL law will make it more responsive and better coordinated. So I'm asking for your support on that. And Resolution 347, the last one, is occupancy tax. And this, again, is to set a public hearing. The public hearing for what I'm about to tell you will be, again, September 21st. But this is a public hearing that we want to introduce a proposed local law, number 5, that will amend the Warren County occupancy tax in that it will allow and recognize short-term rentals. It'll get that defined. It'll get short-term rentals included in the list of those that are subject to our occupancy tax. So those are the 5 resolutions that came out of the Legislative and Rules Committee, and I urge you to support them. Thank you.
You're welcome. Supervisor Wild.
No report at this time.
Supervisor Brady.
No report this time.
Supervisor McGowan.
Well, I have to say I almost had my opportunity of running my first committee meeting, but at this time I do not have a report, so thank you.
Supervisor Sokol.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I first would like to thank Supervisor Simpson for stepping in on my behalf for the committee meeting as well as the board meeting and taking care of that last month, so I appreciate that. This month, Finance did meet twice, the first being on the 2nd of August. In your packet are resolutions 337 through 342 and also 348. It was a relatively swift meeting. Most items in your packet are housekeeping, but I would just like to extend a much thank you to the Lewis Trust, the Lewis family. Every year they donate $5,000, and it's just a really nice thing that they do every year. But before I get into Resolution 348, I would like to have Treasurer Swan.
Without objection. Mr. Swan, how are you?
Good morning, everyone. Nice to see all these faces here today. First of all, a couple of updates. Things looking pretty good. Sales tax is up. Occupancy tax is up. The multi-year plan that was worked up looks a lot better than it has in the last few years. So, you know, with the economy improving, our position has improved also, and that's nice to see. Regarding a couple of the resolutions that are in here, one resolution 342, which is requesting a letter of credit from Glens Falls National Bank to Blue Shield. Basically what's happening here is that since we've changed to a self-insured system, Blue Shield is now the administrator of that. They are not our insurance person. So they are requesting that this letter of credit be sent to them to basically guarantee that we will pay every month what we have to pay them. It's more, I mean, we have never missed a payment, so that's not going to be a problem. The other thing is the occupancy tax law, which Supervisor Strau mentioned. This is a public hearing to set that, and what it is basically is to amend the definition of tourist accommodation to include short-term rental. I mean, I can answer any questions now, or if you get into a discussion of it later, please ask me at that point in time. I know that this is a hot-button item with a lot of the hotelers because of and with a lot of the local towns because of the problem with enforcement on these short-term rentals and the problems that they create. My feeling is on it that they're going to do that regardless of whether we collect from them or not. So maybe we should be collecting. It's about $80,000 to $90,000 a year estimate. So, any questions?
Any questions for the treasurer? Supervisor Dickinson?
That's short-term homeless.
Yes.
Any other questions for Mike? Supervisor Garrity?
Are we also going to start receiving sales tax?
Pardon me?
Are we also going to start receiving sales tax on these properties?
That's the state. I have no way, no authority or anything to start collecting that. I know that they're supposed to be paying it, but that's something that the state, they're the enforcing agent on that.
Is that something we should notify the state after we get this law passed?
Probably wouldn't be a bad idea. I think it actually would be a good idea, yes.
Good. Any other questions for the treasurer? Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Moving on, Resolution 348 came out of the August 13th Finance meeting, and this is a request from the Sheriff's Department. They received a grant fund for $100,000 for the purchase of 4 vehicles. This is kind of a loan, if you will. It's from DASNY. It will be replenished back to our unappropriated surplus with the permission of our budget officer. He is allowing us to extend those monies. So it's a great deal for the Sheriff's Department because the vehicles are Ford Tauruses, and they're like 19, or I forgot what the amount was, but it was a very good price. And also we did meet Supervisor McDevitt, Supervisor Beatty, Kevin Hajos, and Don DeGraw. We met Tuesday with the airport committee, and hopefully we will have something for Supervisor Diamond relatively soon. I think it was a great meeting that we had, and hopefully we have come to an agreement. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Budget Committee did meet on August 2nd and the 5-year projection was presented to the committee. We went over the assumptions that go into that plan and answered what questions came up. I would like to thank the administrator, Mr. Ryan, and Joanne McKinstry for their efforts in putting that plan together. And that's my report.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Supervisor Hyde.
No report.
Supervisor Garrity.
We had four resolutions come out of committee. Two were dealing with personnel changes. The third one's dealing with out-of-state travel for myself and Supervisor Simpson, and I believe maybe Supervisor Merlino. I don't know. Is that up in the air still?
I'm set. I'm set.
So at the appropriate time, we'll need to revise that resolution. 335 to include this travel for Supervisor Merlino, and I'll ask for a roll call vote when the proper time comes. Somebody help me with the procedure. And then
Sure.
336 was filling our ethics committee. We replaced a government employee, or government member with Diana Palmer, Third Ward Common Council of the City of West Love, and a non-governmental member, Chris Covo, was replaced by Emma Wells of Chestertown, who has stepped away from the government. So those are the resolutions out of personnel.
Thank you. I will entertain the amendment right now on 335. I assume you'll move that.
I'll move the amendment.
Mr. Garrity's moving as an amendment to 335 to add Supervisor Merlino to the resolution. Do we have a second? Ms. Frazier on the second. Any discussion on the amendment? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Supervisor Leggett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Criminal Justice Public Safety met on July 23rd and August 13th. There's 5 resolutions before you. 3, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 43. They are, 4 of them are in regarding agreements, 2 with contractors to do work for the Sheriff's Department on repairing their boat, repairing floors at the jail. 2 others are in regards to, I'll call it communications. One is an agreement with Tyler Technologies, and the other one is with First Light to provide Ethernet to the new tower that we have going up at 149. And on 243, that one is about the IM responding. Want to thank Director of Office of Emergency Services, Brian LaFleur, on helping to get that extended through to the end of this year at no extra cost, and also to be able to get all of our emergency service squads and companies in the county on board, so this works as we had envisioned. Also, I just want to mention on the 348 that came out of finance about the Sheriff's Department budget for the purchase of vehicles, urge support of that as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Supervisor Garrity.
I just need to make it clear, on that, the purchase of those cars, that money was secured by Assemblyman Steck. I think we're losing sight of that. Assemblyman Steck provided us with the $100,000, and we were to find a project, and we found a project to purchase those cars. So it also, we owe Assemblyman Steck a thanks for that.
I'm sure we could send some correspondence in that regard. Very good. Supervisor Diamond.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Out of the Facilities Committee meeting, we had one resolution, 309, came out to the full board. I'm asking for the support of this board here to authorize a public hearing for 2 ground lease agreements with Chimahorn Aviation for the construction of hangars number 7 and number 8 at Floyd Benson Memorial Airport, Warren County, New York. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor McDevitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like your support on Resolution 344, which accepts and approves the revised bylaws of the Lake Champlain, Lake George Regional Planning Board. In addition, I would like to make a comment, if I can. I attended the executive session when as it related to some of the information provided as it related to the potential sale or lease of our railroad line in Warren County. Mr. Putterman and Mr. Argenbright presented their proposal, and I listened very intently to what they said. There is an issue that really concerns me, and as reported in Thursday's Post-Star, we supervisors to put out a formal request for renter or buyer. The word buyer concerns me. The sale, not the lease, but the sale of county infrastructure, I think would be a significant mistake for Warren County. I read very closely Mr. Putterman's and Mr. Argenbright's comments. I don't think I saw the word lease in the written information which they provided. Their proposal, as I understand it, is to buy our infrastructure, our railroad lines. I oppose that. It would be similar to Mr. Skimmerhorn buying our airport. I would also oppose that. I think that is poor public policy, and I would hope when we put together an RFP, the terms in the RFP will be for the lease, not the sale of our railroad infrastructure. This is occurring nationally. It's occurring in the state of Texas. It's occurring in the state of Indiana, and working with mixed results. Again, municipalities get strapped for money. They put in place either long-term leases or the sale of public infrastructure. Again, I would hope when our RFP goes out, it is for the lease of our Warren County rail lines, not for the sale of the rail lines. Thank you.
Ms. Bramer, Supervisor Bramer.
Thank you, Chairman. I do not have a committee report, but I'll just comment briefly on what Peter just said about the railroad. You know, it was very ironic to me that I just recently learned about the state filing a proceeding, or their intent to do the abandonment proceeding with the STB, and that was like a day before we had that meeting with the railroad people. And I didn't know about it, but it would have been nice to know that the state was moving forward in that manner, because some supervisors have said, well, if we can't stop operating the railroad because there's still rail usage on the Sanford Lake line north of us, then, you know, we should just let it go to a railroad operator to use full time. But if that line is going to get abandoned, then there are other options available to us, like the multi-use trail. So I think we need to be very careful. I do not support a sale in any way whatsoever. Thank you.
Supervisor Loeb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have nothing to report. I defer to Supervisor Leggett for the report on support services. And I thank Supervisor McGowan for stepping in to cover the chair while I was away visiting my grandchildren, and Supervisor Leggett for and taking over Supervisor McGowan. Great team. And got the job done. So, other than that, nothing to report. If Supervisor Leggett has anything else to add, I will say the resolutions speak for themselves.
Thank you. Supervisor Driscoll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No report this month.
Supervisor Frazier.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Health, Human, and Social Services met on July the 24th, and as a result of those meetings, we have 5 resolutions, 317 through 321. 317 authorizes the 2018 agreement with the town of Queensbury to provide certain youth services for the Department of Social Services. 318 awards a bid and authorizes agreement with Durham Inc. to provide transportation for the preschool, children with disabilities, and the early intervention. 319 amends an agreement with Delta Health Technologies for the migration of patient data from Encore to Crescendo. Resolution 320, it's amending an agreement with Emily Russan, occupational therapist, to include staff education services. And 321 approves, we're approving Warren County Health Services Agency evaluation of services and annual report for 2017 for the Division of Home Care and the Division of Public Health and Health, that I would appreciate your support. But I do want to remind you that at 12 o'clock down at Crandall Park is the Warren County Summer Youth Program Picnic, and I would encourage you to go. It's always nice to see the young people receive certificates and a trophy or pins or whatever, and so I think we really should support them in that effort. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Cornell Cooperative Extension Committee met on July 23rd, and the report I have, the site work has begun for the pole barn that we've approved over the last few months. Warren County DPW is doing the site work, and we want to thank them for doing that. The golf tournament is filling up. Next Saturday, there's 150 golfers coming to Coronan's golf course in Warrensburg. They're going to have a silent auction, steak dinner, and contest. Amy Sabatis is still looking for helpers and items for the silent auction, if anybody would like to participate in that. The extension is working on a farm-to-school grant, which is designed to connect local producers along with their knowledge and get it infused into our local school programs, which I think is a great idea. We've got a lot of talent around here with our local growers. September 15th and 16th, they are conducting their Hunter Ed classes for gun and bow. It's going to be at Pack Forest in Warrensburg. If you want to contact John Bow for any information on that or sign up. Oh, the youth fair was fast. Also. Do you know how many participants? 300 participants in the youth fair. So quite a successful event. So then on July 24th, we had our DPW meeting, and we had 3 resolutions that came out of that meeting. 327, which is authorizing an agreement, a lease agreement with Revolution Rail Company for the use of the railroad ticket sales building. And 328 is rescinding a resolution with the Glens Falls Transit to utilize Up Yonda Environmental Center as a trolley stop due to the contractor withdrawing. And 329 is an agreement with National Vacuum Environmental Services for removal, transport, disposal from bulk petroleum storage tanks, the water and sludge. In that meeting, we had a report on the Warrensburg Bike Rally, where they had 69,983 motorcycles, cars, and trucks. Very successful event. It's growing each year. It was an 18% increase. So that's good to hear that. And then we heard from Scott McLean, which is the owner of Stony Creek Ranch Resort, that was interested in using our line for approximately a 30-day period for a themed program kind of around the trail, the train to Christmas Town. We haven't heard anything further from him, so I'm not sure if that'll develop or not. And then on August 13th, we had another, or August 10th, we had another DPW meeting to discuss potential lease or sale opportunities with the rail line, with the rail corridor. And out of that executive session, we came out and we had decided that we would draft 2 RFPs, or multiple RFPs, one for lease, one for sale on the railroad. And there was a notice of intent of filing an abandonment, and the actual application will be filed on August 29th, which at that time there's a 45-day period for comment. Okay, on August 13th, the Warren-Washington County IDA met, and the highlight of that was we approved the project appointing Greenwich Preservation Group, which is they're a group that is developing the old Wally's building in downtown Greenwich. Extensive renovations, and we're executing and delivery of the closing documents. So there's been a recent uptick in interest in our industrial park, in our lots. There are people that have contacted us about potential opportunities, so it's looking good. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Supervisor Hogan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have no committee report. However, if I may, for just a moment, I did attend the youth fair, And I just want to say how very proud I am of some very talented children we have in this county. It was amazing. They sang, they danced, they had artwork on display. Hard-working kids. Several of them are going on to represent the county at the state fair, and we should be very proud of them there. And yes, I will be at the picnic that night.
Good.
We had 3 kids this year, and they worked hard. They were great kids. I swear, at the end of the summer when I worked with them, their whole appearance had changed. They had grown up, and they really owned their job. It was a fabulous experience and a really great program. I think we should all continue to support them. Finally, I want to urge DPW committee to slow the process down. We don't know where this stands in the next hour, and I'd like you to consider withdrawing your decision to put out RFPs. I think it's an that's all.
Thank you. Supervisor Dickinson.
Environmental concerns and real property met twice. We had a regular meeting on July 30th, a couple resolutions, just housekeeping. But on August 13th, we had what people refer to as our last chance meeting. Those of you that have been on board for a while, you will remember the fiasco we used to have on last chance. The room was full of people, everybody had a story. We had 2 people come. They were both very well prepared. Both Alexi and Mike and their staff had walked them through the requirements and the problems that the 2 people had with their property. The committee decided that they both had a substantial interest in the property they were concerned about and granted them an extension, which basically took them off the sale list, give them time to get some representation and see if they can figure out how to get their property back and pay their taxes. So it's gone from being a sideshow to being very well organized, and I extend my sincere gratitude to both Mike and his office and to Alexi for a great job in getting this organized and cut through. We have, how many do we have on that?
Right now, we have a lot of extensions until the end of August with the temporary grant. So currently, the list is still probably close to 70 parcels, but after those extensions come off, we'll be closer to probably 40 parcels.
You might want to repeat that just so the board understands what Lexi said. She wasn't at the microphone.
We have 70 parcels that are under consideration for tax sale. Of those 70, approximately 30 of them are still working with Alexi and Mike and will probably be pulled, so the final sale will be about 40 parcels, which is significantly less than what it's done in the past. So they've done a great job. Then I have 2 other minor points. The Warrensburg Bike Rally, the 69,000 is an automobile count on the road, and it's an increase in traffic on that road. Not necessarily that they were motorcycles or that they were actually at the Warrensburg Rally. It's just an increase in traffic. To put that in perspective, Americade, the mother of all motorcycle rallies, has 50,000 motorcycles. And that's a pretty secure number. They actually do come. So I just want to put that in perspective when you throw that number out there. And did I hear you say John Bowe was teaching the rifle safety class?
Yes, he is.
Okay. He's teaching the bow tie.
Is that a good number or a bad number, that 69? Is
That was the number that was reported.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Supervisor Dickinson. Supervisor Merlino.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tourism did not meet in July. Our next meeting is this coming Tuesday on the 21st, but we still were active. We were at the racetrack on Wednesday. We had a nice display up there, and I don't have the total tally, but I bet you we got close to 600 people signed our book and gave us email addresses. We were also had with us the Adirondack Close School and the Lake George Group and Pubbery, and the Hidden Hollow Maple Farm all were on display with us. We will air at the meeting Tuesday, if anybody's interested, our commercial for the fall. It starts on the 27th of August. Smith Travel report for June was up 4.1%. We're waiting for July. We hope we can get it by Tuesday. And according to the tourism economic report for the state of New York, travel spending is up 4.3%. That's my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Merlino.
Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Leggett.
If I may report for
Of course.
Supervisor Loeb on the support services, there are 3 resolutions in front of you, 330, 331, 332. One is for information technologies, authorizing an agreement for support services for storage. The other one is from self-insurance, amending resolution to increase the number of days of chainsaw safety training. It was very popular, of course. We would like to extend thanks to Amy Clute and her department on providing these safety training courses to all of our county and town employees, making it a safer working environment for everybody. Also, from the county attorney, amending a resolution authorizing a settlement with former Westmount resident. I want to thank the county attorney's office also for pursuing these outstanding balances attributed to Westmount. Thank you.
Thank you. Report by the county administrator.
Good morning. It's my privilege this month to recognize several individuals who've achieved significant employment milestones this month with the county. From DSS with 35 years of service, Barbara Mead. From the Sheriff's Department, each with 25 years of service, Major James LaFar, Patrol Sergeant Robert Smith, and Communication Officer Anthony Fidd. And finally, from Countryside Adult Home with 20 years of service, Tammy Morehouse. To all of you, we sincerely appreciate your hard work and dedication, and we wish you continued success and congratulations. A report on my activities since the July board meeting. On Wednesday, July 25th, I convened a department head meeting. Supervisor Thomas and I provided 2019 budget instructions and guidance documents to all the department heads. And I also requested participation in several administrative procedures that, since I started in April, I felt needed added emphasis. And with each of these items, there were at least 2 board members who felt as I did and spoke to me privately and requested action. The first, I've asked that all department heads provide details on their potential agenda items at least 1 week in advance of their committee meetings, and for this information to be sent to me, the committee chair, the clerk of the board, and the county attorney. The intent behind this is to give the administrative team as well as the board members more notice of the items that need to be considered and more time to give these items critical thought in the interest of promoting improved decision making. If a last-minute resolution is needed by a department, which does happen for legitimate reasons, department heads have been instructed to get the approval of the committee chair and my approval in order for that item to be added to the agenda. Second, I reminded department heads of the importance of the auditing function in ensuring that we all live up to our responsibilities to the taxpayers. The county auditor has been working diligently to improve auditing standards, and I expect all departments to cooperate in that effort. And finally, I asked department heads to be mindful of when their contracts expire, as well as their annual recurring items that need resolutions at certain times of the year that are predictable, so that we can ensure timely approvals by this board. Also on July 25th, I helped facilitate the Lake Champlain Lake George Regional Planning Board meeting, which took place here and was well attended by Warren County supervisors, and among other things resulted in the adoption of much improved bylaws. I continue to remain in touch daily with Chairman Dave O'Brien, helping to facilitate on matters concerning the Regional Planning Board. On Thursday, August 9th, last week, I attended FEMA training all day on the National Incident Management System and the Incident Command System. Amy Hirsch from our Emergency Services Department did an excellent job facilitating that training, so I'd like to thank Amy for taking that on. Routine for her. She does it quite a bit and has instructed many people, and she does a great job. Aside from these activities, it was a very busy month for me. My days were populated with meetings on issues that included airport negotiations, the multi-year forecast, the I Am Responding contract, animal cruelty prevention services, FOIL procedures, collective bargaining negotiations, the railroad, savings opportunities with the county's health insurance program, and of course the shared services initiative. As required by statute, I'll be calling 3 public hearings and a final meeting of the Shared Services Panel to approve our plan before September 15th. And I'd also like to report that Tammy DiLorenzo officially joined my office on August 6th, and she's doing a phenomenal job already. Very pleased to have her on. One other thing I'd like to highlight is that there is a revision to Resolution 332, which is that resolution has already been mentioned. It's a write-off of a Westmount receivable, and as a technical matter, we included an additional resolve paragraph to make it clear that we're authorizing the county treasurer to write that off. And that is my report for today.
Thank you. Report by the county attorney.
No report, thank you.
Reading of communications.
We received reports from the Capital District Regional Off-Track Betting, their financial report dated May 31, 2018. That was a bound report and was not emailed to the board. Everything else that's on this list was sent previously. We have a Warren County Department of Weights and Measures monthly report from July 2018, Warren County Probation Department monthly reports of criminal and family workloads for May and June of 2018. Minutes from the Warren Washington County Civic Development Corporation's June 18th, July 18th, and July 23rd meetings. Warren Washington County Industrial Development Agency June 18th, July 18th, July 23rd meetings. We have received a letter from Fitzgerald Morris Baker Firth, notice of real property transfer to non-tax exempt entity regarding Town of Queensbury parcels transferred from the IDA to BBL Tribune. New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation, informing that the New York State Historic Preservation has agreed to add the Queensbury Hotel to the State Register of Historic Places and has forwarded the nomination to the Keeper of the National Register in Washington, D.C. to request adding the property to the National Register as well. Letter from Warren County Attorney Mary Elizabeth Desane appointing Amy Levine as First Assistant County Attorney, who shall be the only attorney with authority to exercise the powers and duties of the office in the event of a vacancy or in Ms. Desane's absence or inability to perform duties of her office. We received a check in the amount of $4,513 from the Capital District Regional Off-Track Betting Court for their June payment, and Washington County Board of Supervisors Resolution Number 176 of 2018 adopting the Adirondack Community College budget.
Thank you. Reading of resolution.
Proposed resolution numbers 307 through 342 were mailed. Proposed resolution number 332 was amended after mailing, as explained by Mr. Moore. The revised resolution was emailed to the board, posted to the county website, and copies are on your desk. A motion is needed to approve the amendments to resolution number 332 as presented.
A motion to approve the amendment. Mr. Garrity on the motion. Second. Mr. Dickinson on the second. Discussion. Bill?
Discussion on resolutions?
I'll get there. I'll get there. We're ready for the question on the amendment. All those in favor of the 332 signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried.
Okay, proposed resolution numbers 343 through 348 were developed after mailing following committee meetings held on August 13th. Copies of the resolutions were emailed to the board, posted to the website, and copies are on your desk. A motion is needed to bring proposed resolution numbers 343 through 348 to the floor.
Motion, Mr. Dickinson. Mr. McGowan on the second. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Alrighty. Now I'll open it up to the public. Anyone in the public wishing to comment on any resolutions presently before us? Sir?
My name is Timothy J. Moriarty, Sr. I'm a resident of town of Queensbury. I'm here to talk about the proposed ban on plastic bags. This issue first caught my attention about a year ago when I saw it in the local press. I thought at that time, and still do, that this is really an unnecessary intrusion by government into the everyday lives of our citizens and our residents of Warren County. And also have unintended consequences. A year ago, in June of 2017, a resolution was to have the county urge the New York State Legislature to pass a statewide ban was brought before this body here, some of those that were advocating it emphasized that it was not a ban of plastic bags in Warren County. It was only to advocate that the state take some action. That resolution failed. This June, almost a year to the day, an almost identical resolution also came before the board. It passed. Now, 2 months later, we're talking, this resolution has morphed into another resolution to ban plastic bags unilaterally in Warren County. I think this is a real bad idea. This law might be acceptable in places like Burlington, Vermont, Portland, Oregon, San Francisco, but I don't think that this law reflects the thinking and the will of the vast majority of the people who live in Warren County.
Sure. Thank you for being here. The legislation in front of us is to set the public hearing, and of course you're more than welcome to come to the public hearing and speak your mind. I know you've taken the time to come here this morning, and so I did want to extend enough courtesy to you to speak your mind. But we will be holding a public hearing on this, and you'll be more than welcome to speak fully to the issue at that time. If you want to speak to the resolution in front of us to set the public hearing, if you don't feel we should be having a public hearing, that we might understand. But that's the legislation that's in front of us.
Well, my point was to bring this to the attention of the board so it doesn't get any further than this. I spoke at the committee meeting a month or so ago, and with the same opportunity.
And I think you've done that, sir. Do you have more that you'd like to say at this time?
Well, not if you're restricting it to the issue of the resolution and the public hearing. No, I was talking more on a broader scale about the legislation, proposed legislation itself.
Right. Well, I think given the fact you've come out this morning, I would like to extend to you another minute or so if you would like to continue.
Okay. Well, I don't think that this law has really been thought out too well. I haven't seen any detailed analysis of the cost of the proposed law, the administration of it, how much it would cost to enforce it, how much it would cost to promulgate the legislation itself, the rules and regulations, and so forth. Okay, but since this is only regarding the resolution itself for the public hearing, I'll stop at this point.
Well, thank you. And thank you for coming out to the meeting, truly. Anyone else in the audience wishing to address any resolutions presently in front of the board? There being no one, Supervisor Garrity?
I'm not sure we reported. I need a roll call on 335.
That's exactly where I was going. Roll call on, what was that number again?
335.
335. Any other requests, Mr. McGowan?
309.
Roll call on 309. Mr. Thomas?
Roll call on 324.
Roll call 324.
And just a comment before we move on.
Yes, sir.
While it is setting a public hearing, it's also introducing legislation, this resolution.
Yes, the public hearing is on the legislation. That's correct.
Right. But you're introducing the legislation also.
Any other roll calls?
I'm sorry.
Supervisor Hogan?
327.
Roll call on 327. Supervisor Loeb?
323.
323.
Oh, if you read it.
Roll call on 323. Any other roll call requests?
Introducing proposed law.
Okay, discussion on resolutions. Supervisor Diamond.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Resolution 329, it's an authorization of a bid
for an agreement with National Gas and Environmental Services Corporation to the lowest responsible bidder. And it references a bid tabulation sheet, but in this packet or in my documentation here, it doesn't have the cost of capacity storage to approve. What I'm looking for is what is the actual amount we're looking to approve today in this agreement.
Just a moment.
I would hope going forward that when we're looking at contracts with responsible bidders, and you reference the lowest responsible bidders, I would only ask if we include the bid tabulation sheet in our packets, so we all have the bids comparable and that we're actually voting on that contract. Right now, I'd like to support it,
I understand.
but I don't know what we're voting on.
Excuse me, Commissioner Hajos, do you have anything with you?
I don't have to bid tab. Bid tab was part of public works.
It was.
So I don't know why it's not included as part of the resolution. But the bid tabs are always included.
Is it something we can secure?
Mr. Hayes, do you know what the amount is?
I don't. It's probably an hourly rate and a call out fee.
Okay.
We will endeavor to see if we can secure it during this part of the meeting, Supervisor Diamond. Point well taken. Discussion on, any further discussion on 329? There being none, I'll close discussion on 329. Discussion on other resolutions. Supervisor Loeb.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ask for Resolution 323 to be made a roll call vote so that it's in front of everybody. Resolution 323 is calling for a local law, which is going to be with us for a long time. Our county attorney is working hard with the outside attorneys to draft a resolution that's going to work not just for, in general, for New York State, but for Warren County. She does need input from the members of this board. She cannot read our minds. When I look at the resolution, I'll start at the end, which is the governmental function of cost recovery. It does not show any mechanics for identifying the costs that we're referring to. And it doesn't show any mechanic for identifying separately the levels of responsibility that different entities have for those costs. Iron Gate Family Practice, Hudson Headwaters, Hannaford Pharmacy, or any of the big pharma companies. If we're making a local law, which leaves it open for future boards of supervisors to administrate and increase penalties and identify parties that have these responsibilities, I think we need to put it down in black and white now what our intent is and not leave that open. Now, regarding the specific sections of Section 5, public nuisance, it talks about the opioid epidemic and how bad it is and who are the transgressors. I will say 4 years ago, last January, I had heart surgery. And by the way, thank you to the board members for a card that you sent me. One wonders if those cards are of any value. Well, when you're on the receiving end, you read those cards over and over again, so it's much appreciated. Well, at St. Peter's, they prescribed morphine, and they sent me home with Percocet. Now, if I look for under Section 5, number 5, it says, the selling, distributing, and prescribing of prescription opioid pain pills is a hazard to public health and safety. So, going back to my earlier statement, now are we putting St. Peter's on notice that the next time they have a patient who has open heart surgery or anything else, if they prescribe these medications, they're going to be in violation of Warren County public law? These are the things we can modify that statement with just a few words, and perhaps at the public hearing we'll add those changes. There's also a change. The manufacturers of prescription opioids and those of the chains of distribution have wrongfully abused the privilege, at what point are we saying they're abusing the privilege? I understand all the background. But we've got to put down what we're referring to. We just can't speak in generalities to make our constituents say, oh, Board of Supervisors is doing a great job, and then hope we collect some of the change that this outside law firm is going to work towards getting. The selling, distributing of large amounts of opioid pills in the county has created a public health. Large amounts, does that mean if someone distributes a large amounts to a particular individual, or if they're a very active pharmacy and they're distributing large amounts? These things have to be. Hudson Headwaters prescribes a heck of a lot more in the way of opioid medicines than Iron Gate or any of the other offices. These things have to be delineated. Otherwise, we're leaving it open to governmental abuse in the future. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Any further discussion on the opioid resolution? Supervisor Merlino.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick comment on this, the bag issue. I know it's a public hearing, and I'm hoping that we definitely put this out in more ways than one so the public finds out about it. I mean, I don't know about any other supervisor, but I have been getting emails about it. And I think we really got to let the public know what's going on. Maybe not just one notice in the paper, but maybe 2 or 3, so they all could be here on the September meeting. Thank you.
Well taken. Supervisor Wild.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To add to that, my comment relates to the timing of the public hearing. 10 a.m. on a Friday may preclude many people who have both positive and negative thoughts about this legislation. And I'd like to propose that because it is a public hearing, that we make it available to the majority of the public and schedule this in the evening. I've had many comments regarding this proposed legislation, some positive, some negative, some with real concerns. They're quantifiable, some that are more emotional. And we kind of need to take this all into account as we move forward. But my suggestion, again, would be to have this as an evening public hearing to make it accessible to the majority of the public.
Are you advancing an amendment to the resolution?
Of course, I'd like to do that. To a 6 p.m. meeting? I'd be open to other suggestions from members of the board, but I would really like to suggest that we do this.
No, on that,
But that's what, just be clear on this, if we're going to meet other than during the established meeting of the board, we would have to have special public hearing, correct? I'll turn to the county attorney on that. Would we have to have a resolution? Would that indicate it's a special meeting?
Yeah.
So we would have to schedule a special meeting. But first, let me just say it to the general notion of a special meeting. Is there a second to that idea for discussion purposes? Mr. Merlino on the second. I'll continue discussion. Mr. Dickinson?
I would suggest we have 2 meetings. Do the one that's scheduled on the Board of Supervisors date and set up another one during the, I don't think Friday night at 6 is a good idea,
No.
but in the evening on some other day.
Further discussion. Supervisor Hogan.
I have a question. Have we found attendance at our evening meetings that we hold once a year to be superior to the daytime meeting attendance? I'm not shooting down the idea.
No.
When you tell me to be here, but I'm just curious. Have we found this to be necessary?
We offer the opportunity. Whether individuals utilize the opportunity or not, it's because it's after hours, after the work days, maybe not long after the work day, but I think it depends on the issue, is the way I would respond. Supervisor Bramer.
Like Supervisor Hogan said, I'll be here when you tell me to be, but our attendance isn't that great in the evening meetings. Also, I support public education a lot. I think that's a great idea to get this out there, make sure the public knows what we're talking about, and that they know the details of the latest version, not something that we worked on 2 years ago, but this latest version. And they can always provide comments, correct me if I'm wrong, They can always provide comments by email if they can't make it physically to the meeting, and Amanda could read them as communications.
We receive correspondence all the time. That's right. And I believe when addressed to the board, that they're disseminated to the board. Further discussion, Supervisor Driscoll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll preface my request with an apology to my colleagues and the public. I'd like to ask if it would be possible to provide an exhibit of what the options are as far as single-use disposable bags and the alternative thicker plastic bag that could be used by a store in the absence of the disposable bags. If we could set up an exhibit someplace in the county building so that people, in addition to the legislation, have an idea what they're looking at as far as different types of bags and what options might be available down the road.
Further discussion. Supervisor Lowe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In support of Supervisor Wild, Supervisor Dickinson's motion, and second by Supervisor Molino, the idea of a public hearing at night, I understand. I was at the last supervisor meeting. We had very low attendance, but this is a particular issue, and if we schedule it close to the regular meeting, for instance, Thursday night before, it would give, even if there's only 2 people that show up, it gives the public that extra opportunity and prevents anyone from saying, rightly so, the government's trying to avoid any input from the public.
Let me ask our county attorney a question. I think this would fall under the chairman's authorities under special meetings. Is that generally correct?
To schedule it?
Yeah, that the chairman can schedule a special meeting of the board.
So if you're going to just schedule a special meeting for that one particular issue, then you can schedule it. But if you're going to change the board meeting to a nighttime, you would have to waive the rules.
We would have to waive the rules. So there's a number. Does everyone understand the growing complexity of this? For example, the resolution could be to establish a special meeting, in which case it's authorized. You don't have to authorize the chairman, just basically to authorize a special meeting, at which time the chair will establish such date and time as we would, of course, want to look at the calendars of all the town board meetings and try to pick the very best evening date that we can. No promises. We always seem to affect 1 or 2 supervisors whenever we set an evening meeting, but with that understanding, we could do that. Or we can amend the existing resolution as it stands, which would require an amendment relative to the date and time. But to do that, we would have to have, I believe, a waiving of the rules. Would we have to have a waiving of the rules to do that? No, we could do that. Why don't you say that?
So the resolution as it stands, Resolution 324, introducing the the local law, indicates a public hearing would be set for the 21st day of September at 10 a.m. So if the desire is to keep the regular board meeting and at 10 a.m. on the 21st and hold a public hearing on that day, but to hold one on, just for instance, Thursday evening at 6 o'clock as well, we would need to amend this resolution to indicate there would be multiple public hearings and then the date and time of each so that we can publicly notice accordingly. If the change would be to change the date and time of the regular board meeting, in that case you need to waive the rules. But if you're just looking to add a second, you're just amending this resolution to add the second public hearing date and time.
So let me turn to the Supervisor Wild, who introduced the motion, and to Supervisor Merlino, I believe, was on the second on that motion. Are you prepared to articulate the specifics of your motion, or shall I say to change your motion?
I would change, I would suggest changing my motion. I'm not sure how to articulate it, but I do believe 2 meetings are appropriate. And I believe, just as an added thought, if we just have one, it may end up with a disproportionate amount of business representation versus the public. We do it during the day. So I might defer to Mr. Molino or Supervisor Molino if he can articulate the change. Or
would you like to have it? Would you like incorporated into the resolution, since I think the intent is to have 2 meetings?
Yes.
Right.
Am I going too far to say at least one in the evening? At least one in the evening. That what you would need to do is to introduce a motion to amend the resolution to add a special meeting in the evening and just recite the date and the time.
That good for you?
Just like Amanda said. I do parrot well.
Want to make that?
I think.
Wouldn't it
Supervisor
be better
Dickinson.
to give the opportunity to set that second date to you, figure out what would be good, rather than us picking a date now and trying to change it later?
Just one moment. That could be.
Well, you can ask.
Yes, you could authorize the you could authorize the chair in that fashion, and then you would clearly know who to blame. That's exactly right.
Perfect.
Mr. Chairman, may I have a show of hands from supervisors where Thursday the 20th would not be a good day? Since it's always a bad day for you. I'm sorry, I didn't see it.
You got 5.
It's also the first day of Balloon Festival weekend.
How about Wednesday?
Why don't we? If I might, since I've got broad shoulders in this regard, if you would consider at least authorizing the chair, and then I can have Amanda attempt to coordinate all of the schedules. It won't be perfect, but we'll do our very best.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'll give it a try. I'd like to amend my motion to amend the resolution to add a special meeting at a date and time determined by the chairman of the board, authorizing that we have, and I'm not good at this because I haven't done it before.
A second public hearing.
Just a second public hearing, in addition to the one scheduled during the regular board meeting.
Mm-hmm. I think that's sufficient.
Happen in the evening.
I think that motion is clear to everyone. Mr. Merlino, are you prepared to second that?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Now, discussion on the amendment. Supervisor Simpson.
Well, before, I had a discussion on the actual legislative intent. Is it appropriate to do it now, or because it affects my vote on...
I would say, fine, go for it.
Okay. I really have an issue with this legislation. I am all in support of improving our environment. But my issue is all of these legislative intents, 1 through 9, absolutely pertain to every piece of plastic bag, Gatorade bottle, water bottles on the roadways and in our environment. And the issue that I'm concerned about is if we ban this thin plastic bag without doing more work and figuring out the impacts, there's the option that a grocery store or an entity could go to the thicker plastic bags, and we haven't reduced any plastic whatsoever in the environment, but we've got this symbolic resolution in local law, and we haven't improved our environment. So I'm really concerned that while there's a lot of good things that are spelled out in this local law, I don't believe it's ready for the public. And there's a reason why the state hasn't acted, because it's a difficult issue to work through. And I supported the resolution moving this to the state and supporting the state because I believe they have the resources. I don't think at our level we have the resources to figure out the impacts and how we're going to accomplish the goal that we have at hand. But that's just me. I'm just not, I can't support a symbolic, something that can't show me the end to the means. So I'm sorry.
Thank you. If we could, at least for the moment, hone in on the amendment, and then we'll go to the full resolution as amended. Mr. Dickinson? I think that...
I'll write it down.
Okay, good. On the amendment, any further discussion on the amendment? There being none, are we ready for the question? All those in favor of the amendments signify by raising your hand. Opposed to the amendment? The amendment, the resolution is amended to establish 2 public hearings, the first as noted in the resolution, the second as established by the chair, and in consultation with the clerk of the board.
Just a comment. Since you opened the door and permitted Supervisor Simpson to basically state his position, which probably should have occurred at a public hearing, let me speak in strong favor of a plastic bag ban. I think it truly is a good time to do it. Warren County being first, I think makes sense. If not now, when? So I think it is indeed the time. Let's move forward.
Thank you. Further discussion on this resolution, Supervisor Dickinson.
I just want to respond to Supervisor Simpson. Matt, you jumped from the problem to the non-problem. The problem with the plastic bags that we're looking to ban is their thickness gives them the characteristics of being very mobile, easily lost in the wind, transported long distances. As soon as you increase the thickness, that problem quickly dissipates. And that's exactly what we're looking for. If they opt to go to thicker plastic bags, we can really put a damper in the problem.
Further discussion on the resolution, Supervisor Bramer.
Thanks. I want to thank Tri-County New York Transition for bringing this idea to us about a year and a half ago, and we've been working on that initiative since then. But they were working on it since at least 2015 and bringing it to the town of Queensbury and the city of Glens Falls. So this isn't something that people just started thinking about 2 months ago. They brought to us a petition with at least 1,000 signatures of people in our community who were in support of the ban. And it will bring important benefits like keeping our environment free from the plastic bags floating around nature because of their lightweight aspect. One of the things that I've been trying to do in more recent days is drill down on the economic impacts to Warren County, because there's lots of data out there about the environmental impacts and the economic impacts to coastal communities worldwide, the nation. So I'm trying to bring it down to a little bit more local level. And one of the things that's out there, not for us yet, but there is data indicating that tourism dollars can be decreased when we have plastic bag pollution floating around. And I did talk to someone who's a scuba diver and said that there are tons of plastic bags in the bottom of Lake George. So we need to take action now. It's not really a difficult issue. It's a difficult issue politically maybe, but the state did produce a report. There's lots of different options as you can go. This is the one that we thought would be most beneficial for our area and that people would be able to embrace. And one of those reasons is because this particular law, the latest version, is encouraging the use of reusable bags that can be made of cloth, paper, or even plastic, so long as they're reusable and people can legitimately take them home and reuse them again without them immediately getting holes in the bottom. So all of those different kinds of reusable bags will be allowed, and this, could potentially create new businesses in our area, something like Chase Bags. We had that before, and maybe that type of thing would come back, or a different type of business creating reusable bags for our area. I just want to touch on some of the impacts that I've gotten so far from our local people. Glens Falls, their engineer told me that they are getting the plastic bags washed into the influent screens at the wastewater treatment facility, and it interferes with the sewage flow, and they have to go in there, use manpower to fix it, and also there are costs for the repairs of the equipment that get damaged. Queensbury goes out with a regular litter pickup crew 2 to 3 times a week. That is a paid crew, and they are picking up the plastic bags as well as other litter. the Village of Lake George has a litter patrol on a daily basis, and according to Mayor Blaze, they pick up numerous plastic bags. Warren County DPW does not have regular litter patrol, but they pick up plastic bags when they're out collecting other items on the highways. And the other piece of information that I thought was interesting is that our volunteer crews are out doing cleanups regularly on streams, Hovey Pond, Adopt a Highway programs, and you know, they're contributing their time and effort in an in-kind fashion to help us clean up the plastic bags. Tim Lieberman stated that whenever we do a cleanup, we pick up a number of bags, but by the time that we pick them up, they're starting to come apart, and we are picking up pieces of bags. He also noted that many of the bags are missed. So they are out there, and because they are so thin, they are coming apart and creating even more problems. So I think for all of these reasons, that is why Warren County should take action now. We don't need to wait for the state to step out in front of us. And I want to do one more plug. There is a stream cleanup on August 28th at Hovey Pond. If you're interested, go sign up with Warren County Soil and Water. Bring your own bag.
Further discussion, if you will, on setting the public hearing. Supervisor Hogan.
Thank you. Whether you're for or against, this body has talked around this issue for over 2 years now. I think it's time to hear from the public.
Thank you. Supervisor Garrett.
I hate to do this, but I have to add this. We should find out the cause for all the litter. To me, that's the biggest problem, is all the litter on the roads and all these bags rolling around. We haven't discussed that. I mean, we want to ban the bags. You know, and I'll put it out to the public. I want to hear what the public says. But we haven't discussed the amount of litter that's out there that people just throw these out or they blow out. You know, and I think sometimes we need to get tougher on that because our highways in our areas are littered pretty well in Warren County. It takes a lot of manpower and effort to clean them up. And I realize the bags blowing around, the bags in the thing. I may or may not vote for it. I want to hear the public's input. But we're not discussing the root problem. Who's throwing them out? Why don't we go after more littering? That hurts the environment too. That's it.
All right. Further discussion, but before, there'll be another opportunity at the end of the meeting, sir, for privilege of the floor, and you can speak on any subject you wish. This is right now we're just. I'll afford you, at the privilege of the floor, I will afford you an opportunity to speak again. Supervisor McGowan.
Yes, Earl, I wasn't going to say anything, you know, at the time of the committee report, but since Supervisor McDivitt and Supervisor Bramer brought it up was, you know, the railroad. And what I'd like to say to...
Just a moment. We're still on plastic bags, the resolution regarding a public hearing on plastic bags, but I'll be right back to you.
I'll patiently wait.
Brad, thank you. Thank you so much. A further discussion on plastic bags. Supervisor Leggett.
Thank you. I want to thank, I want to call him Professor Wild, Supervisor Wild for including another public hearing. This is an important piece of legislation, and it is something that can have unintended consequences. And as a board, we do the best we can. We batted around in committee, and I voted to bring it out of committee into public hearings so that the public can look at this and comment too. So I think it's worth going out for several meetings on it. Thank you.
Very good. And Supervisor Thomas.
Yes, I know you've heard this from me before, but I see this more as a human issue. These bags don't get where they get by themselves, and neither does the litter. So my approach to this would be to be more stringent on litter and increase the fines on litter and enforce littering, because if you follow this logic of banning plastic bags, then why wouldn't you ban tin cans and plastic bottles? And, you know, where does it stop? So that would be my approach.
A further discussion on this resolution. Supervisor Wild.
Mr. Chairman, thanks. Just two quick comments. One, I'd like to encourage the press to do your best to make sure that we try to get as many of our constituents out to make comments on this. And secondly, one of my biggest reasons for support of this is it has been discussed for a number of years, and I get frustrated with the idea of kicking the can down the road. It's time to make a decision, try to move something forward, and I'm hoping that we're successful in doing so. Thank you.
All right. Before we vote, I feel really obliged, since we have moved onto the legislation, the pros and cons of the legislation and stuff. Without objection, I'd like to afford this gentleman, sir, a few more minutes at the podium, if you would, please.
Thank you. The legislation has been rewritten, calls for the banning of the plastic bags by all retail establishments. Previously, it was only for grocery stores and other stores that sold food items. And the enforcement, when it was only involving food stores and grocery stores, was going to be left to the inspector of the weights and measurement department. And it still is in that proposed legislation. But I don't think that that individual would have sufficient staffing to cover all retail stores in the county. So I think that there would have to be an additional staffing, more bag police and deputy bag police. Tourism is a big part of the county, and I think that if this ban is put into effect, that it is going to confuse people when they come in. They're not going to be aware of this ban. You know, I think people are not really take a lot of consideration of packing, you know, reusable bags when they're planning their trip. The other thing is that the reusable bags also have a potential health hazard if they're not used properly and if they're not sanitized. I think that even if you agree that there's some merit to this legislation, the bottom line is that it should be done on a statewide basis and not on a local basis. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for your patience. Mr. Whitehead.
Thank you. I'll try to keep this brief. I also am opposed to government overreach in most every case, but I don't believe that's the case here. I believe unintended consequences have occurred over the last 30 years. I remember, I'm old enough to remember paper drives back in the 1960s. I participated in them, Boy Scouts, things like that. Back then, you'd go to a grocery store, it'd be a paper bag. Those, if they ended up in the woods, would not last there very long. They would decompose. Plus, you would be saving them and for paper drives and such, which turned out to be not only good for organizations like the Boy Scouts. There was an economical need for them at that point in time. You did have paper companies that were, providing these bags, which are almost all post-consumer waste. It's going back to the 60s in this case is probably not a bad idea. And if you just think about, what it was then before these throwaway bags, and if we go back to that kind of position, I think we'd all be better off. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Can we move to discussion on other resolutions? Any discussion on other resolutions presently in front of us? So Supervisor Stroud.
Yeah, I was just wondering if County Attorney Kassane would speak to resolution number 323 in reference to the opioid cost recovery and public nuisance legislation. and if she could address some of Mr. Loeb's concerns on that matter, I would appreciate it.
I actually share Supervisor Loeb's concerns, so I do think it's worth looking at this law a little more in depth. Supervisor Loeb had suggested some other revisions that I told him we could address at the public hearing. If they are brought up at the public hearing, we can incorporate them after the fact. So I think at that point we were going to try to revise the law further.
Okay, well this is the third time we've been here. Okay.
On that specific opioid resolution, further discussion, Supervisor Bramer?
Yeah, I'd just like to ask our county attorney if this proposed legislation came through from the special counsel.
It did, yes.
And they reviewed the most recent version?
They did.
Okay. But you still think it should be modified further?
Yes, I think they're looking at it in terms of how they can get the most damages from the legislation. I don't think that they're looking at it in terms of a municipality and having this law on the books for years to come.
Right. So, go ahead.
Are we looking for an action, Mr. Straub?
Well, I'm thinking that whenever you put a piece of legislation before the public and you're setting a public hearing, that legislation should be fairly firm. So it sounds like you're going to add substantial changes to this, and I would offer that we table this until we get a proposed law before us that we're comfortable with.
I second that motion.
We have a motion by Supervisor Stroud to table 323 and send that back to committee.
Well, for attorney consideration, it might be a special attorney or whatever, and to address Mr. Loeb's and others' concerns, and have it come back to us to set another public hearing at a future time.
A motion to table at the second. Was that Supervisor Dickinson on the second? Any further discussion on the motion to table? No, I'm sorry. Motion to table takes precedent. There's no discussion on a motion to table. All those in favor of tabling 323 signify by raising your hand. Opposed? 323 is tabled. Discussion on other resolutions. Supervisor Bramer.
Thank you. I just wanted to make or reiterate the comments from Supervisor Stroud about 346, which is the FOIL policy. I do think that it will make our responses back to the public more responsive and hopefully better coordinated. I do want to note that it is setting forth in the policy that people should go to the website and fill out the form to do a FOIL. And I think that most people are familiar with that process and they'll be fine with it. But if they don't know how to use the form or don't have internet, they can still call up to the county administrator's office and be able to get their FOIL request submitted that way. I just wanted to put that out there for the public, for anyone watching, so that they understand they can still call to the county administrator's office unless that's the right place to call, right? Yeah.
Any further discussion on the FOIL legislation? And I'll close discussion on the FOIL legislation. Any further discussion on any resolutions? Supervisor Wild.
Mr. Chairman, I just want some clarification, if you don't mind. The reason why I voted against the motion to table is I didn't get a chance to ask if there are any consequences for tabling a motion and whether it was time sensitive. And I'm wondering if we might be able to update the rules to allow us to have that discussion or some discussion if there are consequences to a tabling. That we have that before that vote.
Yeah, I think that I think our procedures speak very clearly on a motion to table, that it takes precedent. There's no further discussion, and it's tabled. Naturally, there can always be thought about changing rules. So I don't want to foreclose anything, but I think there's issues with changing that particular rule. So I think I would refer you to the county attorney, and obviously you can come visit Amanda or myself at any time, and we can discuss it further. Supervisor Leggett.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask you a question about process. So when things do come for public hearing that is a time for public and others around the board here to bring up points, and it's not just to rubber stamp a pending legislation, but it can also provide the discussion needed to have it go back, to be amended and such. Is that correct?
I try to, as chair, I try to provide as much latitude as possible during the discussion period for that very reason, that the underpinning of the hearing is based upon a legislative initiative, but perhaps I provide too much opportunity to speak, but that's just been my policy, that people are looking to speak, let them speak. I watch the clock and try to continue to keep it oriented, but we're here to deliberate, we're here to speak, we're here to speak our minds, and to the extent possible, I try to provide for that. And when people come from the audience, and I know they're here to speak, and we have rules, but within those rules, we can afford them the opportunity, since they've taken the time to come to speak as well.
Right, and at a public hearing, we're basically taking testimony, listening, and can go back to the drawing board to change any proposed local laws and legislation.
That's correct, and if you want to touch base with Mary, for example, at a public hearing, if there was a determination to modify the local law, could you just explain the process at that point?
Sure. If it's not a substantial change, if it's something very small, it can be revised after the public hearing and then sent on for a vote by the board. But if they are substantial changes, we would have to go back, change the local law, have another public hearing, and then it would go to the board after that second public hearing.
Thank you.
So in complicated pieces of legislation, this can take some time, depending upon the maturity of the document when it gets to you. You're welcome. You're welcome. Discussion on other resolutions. Very good. Without objection, I see Kevin Hajos, our Commissioner of Public Works, raising his hand. Kevin?
I just want to be able to address that question. There wasn't a bid yet for that. That is a term agreement. We don't typically do fund move on one of our things every year. It's only an as-needed basis, so that's done by quote.
And I believe that's been distributed to...
Yeah, but it was just, it is a bid cap, and it was just done by quote. It wasn't an actual bid.
They all received it. Yeah, anyone that wishes a copy of this would certainly be happy to provide you a copy. Supervisor Bramer.
Thanks. Could I ask Mr. Hajos about the status of the rail activities and whether everything is done?
Sure. Kevin, if you'd come to the microphone without objection.
I will tell you that everything is not gone. I do have a updated list that I will distribute today. They've taken out a lot of material last week by the truckloads, and I think maybe 3 other cars have left, and that's it at this time.
What's left?
Probably about 12 more cars and still a fair amount of equipment.
What's their plan?
I'm waiting for them to, I believe, and Mary, correct me if I'm wrong, we submitted a letter to them asking them for a plan. I mean, I talk with the guy on the ground day in and day out. You know, he's telling me he's moving, and they're doing some minor, not moving very fast. But I don't have a plan to say this is the day we're going to be gone.
I thought we had September 1st.
I have never had something in writing saying September 1st.
The instructions to staff regarding this is that if they feel it necessary for any lack of activity, to begin to prepare to take the next step legally, if necessary, to remove any property that is not county property from county lands, buildings, and rail. So that's where we are, I guess you could say, on autopilot. If any supervisors have any think differently, then I would ask you to, or have concerns regarding that, you can talk to the county administrator and the county attorney, and we will reevaluate that. But right now, that's the direction going forward, that we expect all these items that are not county-owned to be removed from our properties. Supervisor Hogan.
I was under the impression that the committee had asked for a written deadline.
Would you like to respond to that? The request for a written response from the, I believe, the two owners.
Yeah. We did ask for a written timeline. Our outside counsel has been on vacation, so I apologize. But we should have that when we get it back next week.
But regardless, the, if there is an activity, there is an activity. We should know that in short order, because the people that are moving these cars, if they're not on site and they're not working to make these vehicles ready to move, we should know that. And so it's, as far as this chair is concerned, it's pretty automatic from here on in. Supervisor Hogan.
Sorry, to be clear, it's not just piles of piles of equipment.
Please speak into the microphone.
Sorry, it's piles of stuff. They're all around the complex. It is noticeable. People who come to visit our beautiful museum very much see it. Every single visitor to the farmers market every Thursday passes these piles. It's affecting our community a lot.
Regarding the September 1st date, the gentleman on the ground, this is not from IP itself, it's the gentleman on the ground that's doing work for them, said that he believes by September 1st, he believes they'll have everything going. So, but that was verbal to me. I don't have anything in writing saying that. It was just a verbal from him saying, I believe I can have everything out of here by September 1st.
I can live with it. It's really good. But I'd like it in writing. I would feel a little better about it.
And I believe that's what I'll wait for the county attorney to receive that.
Just keep us posted.
I will.
Thank you. Further discussion on resolutions. I'm sorry, Supervisor McGowan, I am now back to you. Thank you for your patience.
I forgot what I was going to say. But no, can I talk about what was said earlier? Or would you like me to wait to the privilege of the floor? But since we're talking about the
No, I
railroad,
think
I'd like
you should go right ahead.
All right, I attended the meeting for the railroad last week, and I was really impressed of what came. We do have an entity here in Warren County that is beneficial in many ways. So one of the things I'm going to ask is for all the supervisors here to think about what they really want to do with the railroad. There's over 20 of us here with different mindsets of what we have to do. But for economic growth, that there's a possibility that the railroad could bring if the northern route is not, abandoned. If the northern route is abandoned, we still have a railroad. But my firm belief is we are not in the business, the government is not in business to run businesses, and running a railroad is a business. So from what I've gotten out of, the discussion proposals that came in, and why we're looking for an RPF, is really the economic growth. We have a railroad that comes up to Corinth, for example. Corinth really needs to keep that railroad. They got IP there, which is a huge building, and they want something to do with it. We had someone came in, people have come in and says they want to develop some more growth, which I think could help some of the northern villages and towns going up the line. So I would really like everybody to think of the possibility. The difference between lease and selling is who wants to invest in something that is just a lease. But one of the things I thought about, if we do sell it, if we have wording in the contract, if something happens like the past development on our railroad, is that the county gets it back automatically. So we're not losing our line, but we could sell the line to someone that wants to build upon it to help more of our smaller communities up north.
Thank you. Thank you. Here we go.
No.
Peter,
Oh,
if you
thank you
could
very much.
keep it brief.
I really don't disagree, Supervisor McGowan, with what you said. Economic growth, jobs, the potential to ensure the viability of those tracks. I totally buy that. I do have deep concerns over selling public infrastructure. That is a major step. We give up control, we give up quality control, and we basically give to an entrepreneur the ability to do what they want with those tracks. Do we, because they now own the tracks, does that mean that they can store polluted rail cars on their purchased and owned tracks? Maybe, maybe not. But my point is, selling versus leasing is a very significant step for this county. And so that's my issue. I buy fully the economic growth and the ability to move that raw product from the North Country to the Port of Albany. I'm okay with that. I don't have a problem with it. Lease versus purchase, that's my problem.
And I would say that I think there's quite a process in front of us here, and there's going to be many opportunities to speak. I don't know that we need to exhaust ourselves here this morning, but Supervisor Bramer.
Okay, just quickly. I mean, even if you don't buy into my argument that we should make it a multi-use trail, and we are using it for economic development, it's like a road. It's a highway transportation corridor. You would never sell off a county road that we use for people to reach each other's businesses. Why would we consider selling off our railroad to some third party and lose all control of our county assets that we use for transportation? That's my only question.
Supervisor Wild.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I think we run the risk of having these discussions now that, in my mind, are very premature. It's a very complicated process and the decision that we need to make. And being on the committee, I'm confident that we're going to look at all the options, look at the consequences, the pros and cons, and make the best decision we can for the county. And I think if we go on publicly talking like this, we mislead the public thinking that we're close to making a decision. And in my mind, we're in no ways close to making that decision. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Very good. Discussion on any other resolutions? Then I will close discussion on resolutions, and we will vote on resolutions. I'm not sure, but we're going to give it a shot.
I'm sorry. I just printed out.
I mean, I'm happy at that.
What resolution was that?
It was the 329.
Three-
I have told, thank you for the big tabulation.
329, I've just had my memory refreshed that I indicated we would try to secure the bid tabulation for Supervisor Diamond.
I came up with about 32,000. Does someone have a calculator there?
Just a moment on that amendment.
No, absolutely. Maybe we can generalize and not to exceed $33,000. Is that as needed, right? Is that
Yeah.
Sealed bid, yeah. As needed? Sealed bid.
I don't know. Kevin, if you could come to the microphone, please.
If you look at the resolution in entirety, it says
The resolution is on an as-need basis.
We don't use this contract for, and if it does equal $32,000, we don't do every tank within the county every year. If I have a problem with one of my tanks, I might get the town of Warrensburg that may call me and say, hey, our trucks are not running well. We'll have the tanks tested. Typically it's water and sludge. We'll clean out the tanks in Warrensburg. But this is not, I can tell you right now, honestly, we probably used this once last year, 3 years previous to that, we haven't used it all. It's just an as-needed basis to have the contract in place in case we need to use them.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you.
Oh, okay.
Put a limit on the resolutions not to exceed.
Are you proposing it?
How many people use it, how many tanks are empty, it's just caps what the amount of them.
These are for just strictly county tanks, not anybody else can use this. We only have 7 sites with the fuel tanks, and each one of them may have a couple different tanks in them.
Do you have any historical information on how much you spent over the last
Again, last year I cleaned 1 tank last year.
historical about?
Probably 1 tank every couple of years.
Supervisor Brammer.
I would make a motion to amend that so there is a cap of $33,000. If it goes over that, then we have to come back.
Then you gotta come back. If you don't spend it, you don't spend it.
Well, and that's the reason why we do quotes, because I only do it, I didn't put out a bid, we only did it by quotes, verbal quotes over the phone, we write them down through the bid tab.
Do you have a problem with the unit price with a not to exceed?
Well, I can't, based on purchasing policy, spend more than $20,000 on this. So it's limited to me only doing $20,000, but I don't believe I'm ever going to spend $20,000 in 2019.
I think they were
on this
thinking
contract.
cumulatively. I think you were thinking...
Kevin, to your point, you said it was a quote over the phone, according to the resolution, it was a sealed bid by the purchaser.
I don't draw up the resolutions. I did a resolution request, so I can look at that, but it was not a sealed bid. They were done by quotes. Tab sheet.
That's all right. That's why we're here. Let's get it right, I think.
Typically, based on the purchasing policy, if I'm not exceeding $20,000 a year, it's under my authority to be able to do a service provider agreement or do quotes. Based on the purchasing policy, I think it's over $4,000, I have to do verbal quotes.
Right, but you're limited, excuse me. You're limited by our policy, so you can't overspend.
I can't exceed $20,000.
You can only go to $20,000 on this if you went with quotes. So,
That's correct.
so maybe I agree with
If I understand the concern is that the open-ended nature of it. They'd feel better if there was...
So make it 20. I mean, that's the max. You'd have to come back to whatever the number is. I think it's 20, and we'd have to come back to the committee.
Okay, I heard a yes over there. Supervisor Bramer, you were making, attempting a...
motion to amend and I can make it 20,000. That's all I can go into anyway. I know that's already in the policy. Dennis is going to say that, but
Absolutely.
it doesn't hurt to reiterate it somewhere.
That's fine.
we have a motion.
It's a waste of time.
Right, we have a motion.
Because I think the point I was...
Let's speak through the chair. We have a motion on the floor. First, let me ask. The motion is to amend it to not to exceed $20,000. Do we have a second to that motion? We have a second from Mr. Garrity. I almost hate to ask it. Discussion on the motion, Supervisor Thomas.
Is that for 1 year or for all 3 years?
For 1 year.
20,000 per year. 1 year. But this here says you can do...
We can extend it up to...
do 2 additional years, so I was curious.
But it's based on site, and it's based on a tank or a couple tanks at each site.
No, the 20,000, I believe, the intent was 20 per year.
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. Further discussion, Supervisor McGowan.
Kevin, what is the average price for pumping out of town?
I want to say probably $1,000, $1,100, $1,400, give or take.
And you do 1 a year?
1 or 2 a year.
So, I mean, we're putting a $20,000 cap on a $3,000 bill a year. I don't think we have to go too much farther. Do you, Mr. Chairman?
I have a motion. I have a second. If there be no further discussion, all those in favor of the amendment signify by raising your hand. Opposed? The amendment is carried. Thank you, Supervisor Diamond.
Thanks for making it.
You're welcome. Vote on resolution.
Resolution 307, making supplemental appropriations. Mr. Strauss?
Yes.
Mr. Wild?
Yes.
Mr. Beatty?
Yes.
Mr. McGowan?
Yes.
Mr. Sokol?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Hyde?
Yes.
Mr. Garrity?
Yes.
Mr. Leggett?
Yes.
Mr. Diamond?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
Ms. Bramer?
Yes.
Mr. Loeb?
Yes.
Mr. Driscoll?
Yes.
Mrs. Frazier?
Yes.
Mr. Simpson?
Yes.
Ms. Hogan?
Yes.
Mr. Dickinson?
Yes.
Mr. Merlino?
Yes.
Chairman Conover?
Yes.
Resolution 308, amending Warren County budget for 2018. Mr. Stroud?
Yes.
Mr. Wild?
Yes.
Mr. Beatty?
Yes.
Mr. McGowan?
Yes.
Mr. Sokol?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Hyde?
Yes.
Mr. Garrity?
Yes.
Mr. Leggett?
Yes.
Mr. Diamond?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
Ms. Bramer?
Yes.
Mr. Loeb?
Yes.
Mr. Driscoll?
Yes.
Mrs. Frazier?
Yes.
Mr. Simpson?
Yes.
Ms. Hogan?
Yes.
Mr. Dickinson?
Yes.
Mr. Merlino?
Yes.
Chairman Conover?
Yes.
Resolution 309, authorizing public hearing on 2 ground lease agreements with Skimmerhorn Aviation for construction of hangars 7 and 8. Mr. Stroud?
Yes.
Mr. Wild?
Yes.
Mr. Beatty?
Yes.
Mr. McGowan?
Abstain.
Mr. Sokol?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Hyde?
Yes.
Mr. Garrity?
Yes.
Mr. Leggett?
Yes.
Mr. Diamond?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
Ms. Bramer?
Yes.
Mr. Loeb?
Yes.
Mr. Driscoll?
Yes.
Mrs. Frazier?
Yes.
Mr. Simpson?
Yes.
Ms. Hogan?
Yes.
Mr. Dickinson? Mr. Merlino?
Yes.
Chairman Conover?
Yes.
Resolution 324, introducing proposed local law number 4 of 2018, entitled "A Local Law Promoting the Use of Reusable Bags." Mr. Stroud?
Yes.
Mr. Wild?
Yes.
Mr. Beatty?
Yes.
Mr. McGowan?
Yes.
Mr. Sokol?
No.
Mr. Thomas?
No.
Ms. Hyde?
Yes.
Mr. Garrity?
Yes.
Mr. Leggett?
Yes.
Mr. Diamond?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
Ms. Bramer?
Yes.
Mr. Loeb?
Yes.
Mr. Driscoll?
Yes.
Mrs. Frazier?
Yes.
Mr. Simpson?
No.
Ms. Hogan?
Yes.
Mr. Dickinson?
Yes.
Mr. Merlino?
No.
Chairman Conover?
Yes.
Step back. Resolution 327, authorizing a lease agreement with Revolution Rail Company for use of the railroad ticket sales building. Mr. Stroud?
Yes.
Mr. Wild?
Yes.
Mr. Beatty?
Yes.
Mr. McGowan?
Yes.
Mr. Sokol?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Hyde? Yes. Mr. Garrity?
Yes.
Mr. Leggett?
Yes.
Mr. Diamond?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
Ms. Bramer?
Yes.
Mr. Loeb?
Yes.
Mr. Driscoll?
Yes.
Mrs. Frazier?
Yes.
Mr. Simpson?
Yes.
Ms. Hogan?
Abstain.
Mr. Dickinson?
Yes.
Mr. Merlino?
Yes.
Chairman Conover?
Yes.
Resolution 333, amending table of organization and Warren County salary and compensation plan. Mr. Stroud?
Yes.
Mr. Wild?
Yes.
Mr. Beatty?
Yes.
Mr. McGowan?
Yes.
Mr. Sokol?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Hyde?
Yes.
Mr. Garrity?
Yes.
Mr. Leggett?
Yes.
Mr. Diamond?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
Ms. Bramer?
Yes.
Mr. Loeb?
Yes.
Mr. Driscoll?
Yes.
Mrs. Frazier?
Yes.
Mr. Simpson?
Yes.
Ms. Hogan?
Yes.
Mr. Dickinson?
Yes.
Mr. Merlino?
Yes.
Chairman Conover?
Yes.
Resolution 335, authorizing out-of-state travel for Supervisors Garrity and Simpson and amended to include Supervisor Merlino. Mr. Stroud?
Yes.
Mr. Wild?
Yes.
Mr. Beatty?
Yes.
Mr. McGowan?
Yes.
Mr. Sokol?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Hyde?
Yes.
Mr. Garrity?
Abstain.
Mr. Leggett?
Yes.
Mr. Diamond?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
Ms. Bramer?
Yes.
Mr. Loeb?
Yes.
Mr. Driscoll?
Yes.
Mrs. Frazier?
Yes.
Mr. Simpson?
Abstain.
Ms. Hogan?
Yes.
Mr. Dickinson?
Yes.
Mr. Merlino?
Abstain.
Chairman Conover?
Yes.
Resolution 338, authorizing appropriation of funds from the vehicle reserve. Mr. Stroud?
Yes.
Mr. Wild?
Yes.
Mr. Beatty?
Yes.
Mr. McGowan?
Yes.
Mr. Sokol?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Hyde?
Yes.
Mr. Garrity?
Yes.
Mr. Leggett?
Yes.
Mr. Diamond?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
Ms. Bramer?
Yes.
Mr. Loeb?
Yes.
Mr. Driscoll?
Yes.
Mrs. Frazier?
Yes.
Mr. Simpson?
Yes.
Ms. Hogan?
Yes.
Mr. Dickinson?
Yes.
Mr. Merlino?
Yes.
Chairman Conover?
Yes.
Resolution 339, authorizing appropriation of funds from deferred revenue Gaslight Village parking fees. Mr. Stroud?
Yes.
Mr. Wild?
Yes.
Mr. Beatty?
Yes.
Mr. McGowan?
Yes.
Mr. Sokol?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Hyde?
Yes.
Mr. Garrity?
Yes.
Mr. Leggett?
Yes.
Mr. Diamond?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
Ms. Bramer?
Yes.
Mr. Loeb?
Yes.
Mr. Driscoll?
Yes.
Mrs. Frazier?
Yes.
Mr. Simpson?
Yes.
Ms. Hogan?
Yes.
Mr. Dickinson?
Yes.
Mr. Merlino?
Yes.
Chairman Conover?
Yes.
Resolution 340, authorizing appropriation of funds from deferred revenue Gaslight Village parking fees. Mr. Stroud?
Yes.
Mr. Wild?
Yes.
Mr. Beatty?
Yes.
Mr. McGowan?
Yes.
Mr. Sokol?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Hyde?
Yes.
Mr. Garrity?
Yes.
Mr. Leggett?
Yes.
Mr. Diamond?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
Ms. Bramer?
Yes.
Mr. Loeb?
Yes.
Mr. Driscoll?
Yes.
Mrs. Frazier?
Yes.
Mr. Simpson?
Yes.
Ms. Hogan?
Yes.
Mr. Dickinson?
Yes.
Mr. Merlino?
Yes.
Chairman Conover?
Yes.
Resolution 348, authorizing advance of funds from the general fund unappropriated surplus to the sheriff's budget. Mr. Stroud?
Yes.
Mr. Wild?
Yes.
Mr. Beatty?
Yes.
Mr. McGowan?
Yes.
Mr. Sokol?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Ms. Hyde?
Yes.
Mr. Garrity?
Yes.
Mr. Leggett?
Yes.
Mr. Diamond?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
Ms. Bramer?
Yes.
Mr. Loeb?
Yes.
Mr. Driscoll?
Yes.
Mrs. Frazier?
Yes.
Mr. Simpson?
Yes.
Ms. Hogan?
Yes.
Mr. Dickinson?
Yes.
Mr. Merlino?
Yes.
Chairman Conover?
Yes. Vote on the collective motion. Motion by Supervisor Garrity, second Supervisor Bramer. Ready for the question? Also, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Now I'll extend the privilege of the floor to anyone in the audience wishing to address the board. Mr. Weidenstein?
Yeah. I'm going to give you a short history lesson which affects a couple of the towns on the lake. Back in the mid-'80s, I don't know if any of you remember, the state formed a task force on the land use in Lake George and the lake and that. And I was on the land use committee. And we discovered a lot of really interesting things. And just the past week or two, something came up that we had found. And this is discussion on the beaches like Diamond Point Beach and things like that. To bring you up to date how it really came about, going back to King George, there was a farmer that was evidently very friendly with the king, and he gave this farmer the whole west side of the lake. Belonged to one person. In those days, the people were very considerate, and he realized he owned the whole side of the lake. Nobody could get to the lake. So he put in every mile up the lake an access road for the public to have fishing rights, swimming rights, and ice harvesting rights. Because in those days there was no refrigeration. Over the years, the people on these access roads have taken them over as their own private road. Nobody is allowed on them and things like that. That's not true. Everybody has the right to use these access roads. If you go up Bolton Road and you see one of these roads, look at your speedometer, and every mile up the lake you're going to see one of these public access roads. And that is to let the people have access. One of them goes right through the center of Hartstone Park. If you notice in the wintertime, the state opens it for ice fishing and things like that. Not because they want to, because that's the law. It's never been changed. Everybody has the right to use these beaches. Diamond Point cannot say, oh, you're not a resident, you can't come here. Sorry, it may seem nice to the residents. That's not what the case is. And there is a bunch of these strange laws that go about that have never been changed. I'll give you just another quick one before I move on. If you have a tree on your property, waist high, over 30 inches in diameter, that tree belongs to the Queen of England. You want it removed? Call the Queen. Tell her to take your tree down. But you don't own those trees. That's never been changed on it. There's a bunch of stuff that we discovered like this. But I want to move on to another thing that's a little bit more serious. These roads are getting worse and worse and worse. I've spent over $2,000 having my vehicles aligned. We were made aware in the past week of somebody who hit one of these potholes and totaled their car. According to Channel 6, they did a story on this about 3 years ago. The roads are not going to be repaired. The money is all being taken to repair or build a new Kosciuszko Bridge because DOT, state DOT, their executive gets caught in traffic coming home, so they're building new bridges. so that they can get home quicker at night. There's only one problem. 2-lane highway goes to a 3-lane bridge, you go back over the bridge and you're back to a 2-lane highway. That's all got to be expanded too. They're halfway through the job. They got another 3 years to go, which means we are not going to get our roads touched for another few years. And it's not only us. You go down to Saratoga, look for the exit sign on 16 headed south. Look for the exit sign on 17 headed north. These signs were knocked down 6 months ago. They don't have the money to repair the state. Doesn't have the money to repair them on it. We're taking down the Tappan Zee Bridge. We're taking all of the steel out to off of Long Island, and we're building barriers there for fish. What about our citizens? I think you and I are a little bit more important than the fish having a habitat on the thing. But my problem is we're not going to get any work done on these roads for at least 3 to 4 more years. These roads aren't going to survive. It took me last year to get 4 potholes filled on the Northway, 21 phone calls. I called every week. I called Warren County, DOT, state, and I called Albany. And the problem is, it's not that they don't want to do the work. They don't have any money to do the work. We have got to start getting on the case, and my suggestion is we name all of these potholes after our state politicians. You go home at night, you can say, gee, I ran over Governor Cuomo. I ran over Dan Steck. Because sure as hell we ain't getting them fixed any other way unless we start embarrassing these people. I want to know where all our tax dollars that are collected for gas, for license fees and everything else, and we don't have a single pothole being fixed. As you go down the Northway now and you get to the low area headed south by Great Escape, there's a pothole there. That pothole was improperly filled last year. It's back this year. Hit them. Then go get your wheels aligned on your car because you just knocked them out of alignment. We've got to do something about it. We just can't sit here any longer and say, well, it's the state problem. It's not the state problem. It's our problem because we let the state do it. It's about time we get on Betty Little's case and Dan Steck's case and all the others and say, when the hell are we going to get our roads taken care of? And they're taking down the Tappan Zee Bridge now. They're taking all the steel out for these fish preserves. I think we should ship it up here and we can use it to build guardrails and build our bridges because ours are all falling apart on the thing. I mean, look what happens when you let the bridges fall apart and get in bad repair. Ask the people in Italy if they're happy with their bridges. I don't think so. And we let our bridges go for years, and the thinking was, oh, they get bad enough, the federal government will take over and fix them. You know what happened? We fixed the bridges because the federal government didn't do it. It's about time we get off our rear ends and start complaining about the poor quality of our roads. You can't drive anywhere now without hitting bumps, potholes, or whatever it is. And when the potholes get to the point where a car is totaled, we're getting to the point where it's dangerous and somebody's going to get killed. And it's about time we do something. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to address the board?
Ron, I'd like to respond.
Let's hear from the audience first. I'll be right back to you, Dennis.
I'd like to commend Supervisor Frank for the only one that said, be careful what you wish for because you don't know where this is going to go. Example, last night I stopped for my usual glass of ginger ale after work, and I was immediately harangued because in the state of California, I would have been breaking the law in the entire state because I was using a plastic straw. That's where they're at. And Frank, you were very good. You spoke up about the fact that we need to be careful where this thing is taking us.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to address the board? All right, Supervisor Dickinson.
I just want to respond to one of the comments Mr. Weinstein made. We, the town, own Diamond Point Beach. It's actually Jacobs Beach. It is not part of the common beach areas that are along the lake as he described. Minnesota that just joined. It was given in 1913 by Mrs. Jacobs to the town for the people of the town's use. Wherein lies the problem. We've had numerous public hearings. We've had 3 of them this summer talking about Diamond Point Beach. So it's a little sensitive area, and I just try to set the record straight. It is a town beach. It is meant for the residents of the town of Lake George, and it is under the control of the town of Lake George, totally.
Thank you. Announcements. Supervisor Garrity.
I think there's a dedication at SUNY Adirondack in September, and maybe before board meetings. Do you remember, Amanda, the date?
I want to say it's on the same day, but...
Oh, it could be.
Yeah, let's get an email out to everyone. We'll get an email out to everyone. Any other announcements?
I was going to say.
Motion to adjourn? Supervisor Dickinson, second.
I think she could.
Supervisor Strau, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned, everyone. Thank you.
Are adjourned.